How does your kid make decisions? How do they know the difference between right and wrong? When they become to an age where they are interested in dating, how will you guide them? What will be their standards that you have in your own home for what your kids watch or do in their spare time? What kind of education will you give them? Will church be a priority in your life? Will you model your faith? Will you let your kids decide on their own? All of these are really big questions, and there's 1,000 more I could have asked. But all of these go down to, how are you going to teach your kids their worldview? My name is Dan Burrell. I am one of the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship in suburban Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm joined today by our executive producer and co-host, Josh Brom, who is the founder of the Equal Rights Institute. And Josh, you got kids, I got kids.
Yep.
It's complicated, isn't it?
It's so complicated. What were we thinking?
Yeah. Well, and my kids are all adults, and I have good conversations with them at times about the job I did in teaching them their values. Yeah. It's interesting. My kids, even some of my kids who have chosen, let's just say, different paths.
Sure.
That sometimes
they don't agree with 100% of the things that Dan Burrell
and sometimes they don't agree with 10% of the things. And but we've maintained our ability and our relationship to discuss them, because I recognize today that they are adults.
Yeah.
And they have to navigate this themselves. In fact, my son is always begging to come on to be a guest on this podcast.
Oh, we should totally have one. And, that would be fun.
Yeah, I'm just a little nervous yet. He is wearing me down. He keeps bringing it up.
Maybe
every time.
he and I can be on, and we'll just kick you out.
Yeah. That may be the last episode of Life Talks. So, but my kids sometimes tease me about my efforts when I was younger. They tease me about some of the restrictions I had. Sure. They make up things all the time. The other day, oh yes. The other day they kept telling me that I told them that some cartoon character was evil.
You don't remember which one?
No, I don't remember which one.
The Tasmanian Devil, because the devil was in it.
No, that would have been my generation. It was Kinkapoo and all those. What are those called? They have the game. The
Pikachu?
Game.
Pokemon?
Pokemon. That's it.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just so
old.
Were
you not you weren't an anti-Pokemon parent?
I don't remember that being part of me. I kind of felt ambivalent, and as I just demonstrated, rather ignorant of it.
There was definitely a moral panic going on about Pokemon for sure among Christian parents, I think, for a while.
Yeah, so just as much as my kids claim that I exaggerate illustrations when I'm teaching or whatever that they're involved in, they exaggerate on me. Yes. But one thing they all recognize is I was actively engaged in their moral worldview formation.
Yeah.
Yeah. From the books we read together as a family to the patterns we had. Yeah. And ultimately, every person must decide for themselves what they accept as truth and the ramifications of that in their life. Yeah. That's just a rule of the universe. Yep. But parents have this responsibility. Now, you are interesting to me, Josh, on so many different ways. That's why I love talking to you. But you grew up very sheltered. Yep. You grew up in a homeschooled environment.
Yep. Pretty fundamentalist church.
You were invited actually to be an activist of sorts. During a stage in your life where formation was still very active.
Yeah. I was 11 when they took me to an abortion clinic to pray with a group of guys, which luckily they weren't doing a rescue, because there were guys at the church that did rescue sometimes where they physically blocked
and chain themselves to the entrance
and get arrested kind of a thing. But we prayed and I was 11. It definitely affected me. I'm not bummed that I had that experience, but it was definitely a very life-forming experience for me.
And I think all of us, without exception, including my children, myself, we love our parents. Yes. And I had a good childhood. I never missed a meal. I had a good education. And I wasn't allowed to go to the movies when I was growing up because of the worldview. I wasn't allowed to go to dances because of the worldview. Yeah. And you say, did you miss out on anything? Well, I've never seen Star Wars. And I dance like a Baptist.
It is a bummer that you haven't seen Star Wars. I think I might need to come over and show you Star Wars.
All in all, if I had to live all over again, would I change it? No. It is who I became. Yeah. And I thank God I lived in an intact home.
It could have been a lot worse.
It could have been a whole lot worse. And, my dad died when I was very, very young. But, my mom and I, we joke about it together. Still. Yeah. And there have been times when she says, I feel bad about this. I don't feel bad, Mom. It's part of my character now. It's part of my nature.
And like it's evidence that you guys can joke about it too. Like I can joke about some of the kind of overly sheltery things that were going on in my childhood too, and how like kids kind of always rebel against that when that happens. But it's like the fact that we can joke about it, I think, shows that like we also weren't being spiritually abused growing up. Like it could have been a lot worse. And there are things that a lot of conservative parents, Christian parents, meaning well, have done that decades later you're not joking about. If any, hopefully you're working with a pastor, a therapist, or whatever, and like trying to get on the same page on stuff. But like I think probably it's kind of a bummer that you didn't go to dances. I didn't go to dances either. So we both kind of missed out on that.
Yeah, but a lot of people that are going to dances didn't get to go to cool youth activities like I did.
True.
There were other things that I did that other people, our youth group did a lot. We went roller skating, which was dancing on wheels. But apparently, if you were 2 inches off the ground, all the rules were off. You could hold hands and you could dance and all kinds of stuff. But and yes, there was some silly double standards, silly hypocrisy going on.
Yeah.
But all in all, again, if you teach your kids how to think, they'll be able to navigate through that.
Yeah.
And they'll rebel because we have rebellious hearts and natures. That's part of how we learn and grow up.
Yeah.
And they'll make stupid choices, and you'll have to work with your kids through those choices. But
it seems like the way that I've heard you talk about your parents and decisions that they made in this area are very similar to the way that your kids are able to talk about the way that you raised them, which is like in both cases, I think this is pretty common and is the ideal, is where the conservative parent is going to do their best. And they're going to end up having to make like thousands of decisions of what to allow when and how to handle that through this kind of 18-year period or more. And you're not going to make all the right calls. And hopefully every like healthy kid, by the time they hit 30 or 40 are able to kind of recognize that and say like, okay, yes, maybe I wouldn't have made some of these decisions, and maybe now I've got a little list of things that I'm not going to do with my kids. But in the end, they were doing their best, and they got pretty close. Like it might have been a little bit too restrictive, but it wasn't crazy. And you can see what the intent was. The intent was so good and godly, and that I think that really helps. Yeah,
and I think sometimes we are a little ignorant or unaware of the influence of our local culture has on us. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a fundamentalist church. These things had impact. But at the same time, look at the movies that were being produced when I was a child that were still being watched in the 60s, some made in the 50s.
Wizard of Oz.
Well, yeah, that was a cool movie. But in a lot of the movies, the men were very aggressive with the women, very demeaning. Yeah. Everybody smoked like chimneys.
Yep.
And when you got home, the wife, who was dressed in a smock and a nice cotton dress, would fix a martini for the husband, who would be sitting down reading the newspaper.
Him hand and foot.
Yeah. And that was Leave It to Beaver was absolutely normal.
Right.
In those days.
Right.
And we look back on it and we say, what in the world?
Right.
It's just absurd. And the reality is that will happen with every generation.
Yeah.
There are generational norms.
Yeah.
But I think we should even be able to look at the generational norms of the past and of the present and be able to have some discernment based on a fixed truth, which we would say is the Word of God.
Yeah.
So what are some tools that you think today's parents might want to have at their access to be able to make sure that their kids are being formed with a sound biblical worldview?
I can think of one off the top of my head, but this is not a very deep one. This is not going to be the answer of the thing, but just the one off the top of my head. So do you know what Adventures in Odyssey is?
Absolutely. My kids listen to it in the backseat of the car all the time.
Okay. So there was a really, really fun Facebook page back when I was on Facebook, but it was called Adventures in Odyssey was the soundtrack of my childhood. And I really related to that. Yeah. It was on all the time. We had all these tapes and all of that. So
there's another one. Do you ever hear of Patch the Pirate?
No.
So Patch the Pirate was really popular in fundamentalist circles, particularly fundamentalist Baptists. The guy was closely affiliated with Bob Jones University. Sadly,
they were into pirates? That seems a little off.
What are pirates known for? Raping and pillaging,
Right.
stealing. Yeah, but no, he lost.
I mean, they're not known for feminism, so there might have been some overlap there.
Apparently, pilots can be racist, but anyway,
that's true.
But this guy lost an eye when he was very, very young to ocular cancer, and so he had to wear a patch. And,
Patch the Pirate was a dude? Was like an actual, like he was like the guy?
He was a real person. I had him at my church. So
okay, so this is wait.
He was a real person that wrote songs for children. And
is it like a character that he's like created? Okay.
Yeah, but he was better known. His name was Ron Hamilton. He was better known as Patch the Pirate than Ron Hamilton. Yeah, I mean, people.
And it was like a kid's show?
It wasn't a show. It was a series of audio tapes of songs that he had written. One of them was I Hate Broccoli. Something, there was one about pigs, and it was how you take care of your room. They were character lessons, and some of them were really cute. They were really hilarious. And then they formed a Patch the Pirate Club, and it kind of taught values and so forth. And so it was similar to Awana. It became a whole enterprise. And
people had meetings? Were there groups?
Patch the
Pirate.
And so you'd probably find the Patch the Pirate group on, and the tapes are still out there. People still listen to them.
So what did you do there instead of doing the Awana thing of memorizing Bible verses?
You memorized Bible verses, but you sang the songs. They had games and activities and a little workbook that you worked through and a little uniforms. Yeah, absolutely.
Did they have patches?
Yeah, well, I don't know if they had patches or got a complimentary eye patch or something.
Every eye patch. All the patches look the same because they're all eye patches.
But I knew Ron. Ron was a good guy. I think it eventually turned into more of a business. Ron died of dementia a few years ago. Very, very sad. And one of his kids took his own life. And he was one of the characters. He wrote his kids into the songs. They sang along with him. They were pictured in art with him, and they traveled with him. They were a traveling evangelist troupe.
Wow.
And so forth. So a lot of kids learned that. So you had Adventures in Odyssey. Then there was Patch the Pirate. And then there was also Veggie Tales. Do you remember Veggie Tales?
I remember being in a Christian bookstore seeing Rack, Shack, and Benny for the first time. Like they were playing the bunny song. This was before they had to like censor it and put out like the new and improved version because this one was saying I hate doing what my mom and dad say or whatever it said or whatever. But I remember that fourth, I was on this TV and I'm just like staring at like, this is like the best thing ever kind of a thing. Like I've never seen entertaining Christian kid stuff before. And this was pretty fun.
My kids, I don't know that I've ever seen a complete episode, I'll be honest with you, which is probably an indictment on my parenting because my kids used to be able to quote long streams of and they had their inside jokes about
fundraiser idea.
The tomato.
How much could we get people to pledge if we recorded some like reaction videos to like Veggie Tales or something like that?
Crowdsource
we can watch Dan Wood's Veggie Tales for the first time.
And Star Wars. Thinks. We should put Star Wars in there.
And Star Wars. I agree. Those two.
So yeah. I think what you mentioned is good.
I was going to say. So Adventures in Odyssey. Going back to that. So they've kind of modernized. I don't know what Patch the Pirate has done, but Adventures in Odyssey has like an online thing now. You can get your kids a login and they can just stream it or download it on their phones. You don't have to have the tapes or CDs anymore. They're just kind of all there and searchable, and like that's kind of an easy tool.
I was so into Adventures in Odyssey, aware of them because my kids would listen to them while they were in the backseat of my car, that the one time I took my wife to Colorado, she can't do elevation. She gets altitude 6. She's a true Florida girl. But we went down to Colorado Springs. We visited the Adventures in Audio studio where they recorded it. Wits End, which is a little ice cream shop. We did all of that just because, and we didn't have our kids with us. We went back and told them, we went where, all these characters were. So yeah, I remember. I mean,
there were some really, it was a really special thing. I mean, like it was certainly, it was cheesy in some ways and things like that. But I think there was some really, really cool things that focused on the family. I mean, it had to be so much work and so much money making those. And
they did really, really.
There were some really cool things.
Quality job, and I think that's important. When I was a kid, the Southern Baptist had a thing called JOT, J-O-T. I don't know what it stood for, but he would be on like the pub. When I was growing up, you didn't have 24-hour TV, you didn't have cartoon channels, so your cartoons were Saturday mornings and 4:30 to 5 or 4 to 4:30. When you got home off the school bus and you get to watch 30 minutes of cartoons. And the Southern Baptist always paid, and there's a little cartoon character. It was so basic. Remember Pong? It just had the ball?
Yeah.
This was Pong with a triangle underneath it, and he hopped. But he always had a Bible verse message. So as long as we've had media, we've had
Christian media.
And for the most part, it's usually a lot of times it's a generation behind. It's catching up rapidly.
At least.
Because you look at The Chosen. If you haven't seen the new David series on Netflix, it's really well done.
I haven't seen
very, very well done. It's called
The Chosen yet either.
I haven't either. I've seen 3 episodes and I just...
The clips that I've seen as like a video guy who makes fun of most Christian movies, because I think most of them are made pretty terribly, everything I've seen so far looks really, really high quality. I think I'm probably going to see it as really high quality.
Yeah, Chosen and The House of David, both of those I think are done as well as anything you'll see on Netflix, and better than a lot of stuff you see on Netflix. So Christian media, that's one. What's another that that you've seen used or you had used on you or anything? Here's one for me. When my kids I really regret this.
Okay.
Summit Ministries, I don't know whether you're familiar with them, but they would have week-long workshops for young adults that would help them teach discernment skills. And all you got to do is look up, Summit Ministries on Google, and a guy by the name of Jeff Myers is now in charge of it. Jeff's a solid apologist. I met him. I've had him speak for me in some educational events I was in charge of.
I was on Jeff's podcast a year or two ago.
Get out of town.
Last year talking about the ERI. It was really, really sweet.
Yeah.
Really, really cool.
Yeah. So I think if I had a young adolescent, I would start looking into that. They have some they have some that have internships attached to them. They have some that are specializing in journalism. My friend Warren Smith, who is the president of Ministry Watch, but he was also senior fellow at Chuck Colson's Institute on Worldview, and he also used to work for World Magazine. So he's a smart dude. He used to own World newspapers, but he teaches, or used to teach for them. I don't know whether he still does or not. Okay. Oh, and I think that's good. To me, it's like going to. When I was a kid, they had Boys Town and Girls Town that would teach you political process. Yeah. So it's like send your kids, if you're going to send your kids to a week of camp, send them also to a week of Worldview camp. Yeah. So.
Oh, I thought, this is really self-serving, but this is in specific, but we did create a high school curriculum for teaching pro-life.
Tell us more about this,
So
Josh.
if you get a Quit for Life Academy, why did I not think of that first?
I set you up,
but
and
we
you
do. I
strike.
know. I'm just a failure. No, if you go to quitforlifeacademy.com, we created a course that's made for high schoolers, and there are like homeschoolers and homeschool groups that are doing it. But it's best learned with multiple people. A homeschool kid could just sit down and go through it themselves. But I think it's best learned with a parent or a sibling or a friend or in a group or something like that. But it's specifically about the topic of abortion. So it's not like this really expansive apologetics thing. But I think it does handle the topic really, really respectfully. It's made for mixed audiences. It's made for high schoolers.
Yeah, and I've reviewed portions of it, and our church has actually sponsored it in a school.
There's already a school in Oregon that's about to use it thanks to Life Fellowship Church's sponsorship.
That's an endorsement. I hope you'll understand that. But go to Equal Rights Institute and scroll through all their material, but look for this curriculum because if you serve on a Christian school board or if you work with an association of schools, and it can be evangelical, it can be Catholic, because pro-life issue is something that we have in common. And if you're a homeschooler, I think this is something that you should get your kids involved in. It teaches them how to think. But the cool thing about, and I'm going to brag on Josh a little bit, Josh's approach is not your typical in-your-face, throw a lot of scripture at him. He believes in the authority of scripture, no question about it, but you have to meet people where they are and love them to where they need to be. And in doing so, using persuasive arguments, facts, science, reason, rationale, but also your demeanor, how you engage with them, how you listen before you lecture, and things like that. These are key things that Josh brings to the curriculum that makes it, to me, state of the art, makes it the diamond of all of them. So I think that is good. The reason I like the curriculum and the reason I like this part is because it is strategic and intentional. So a lot of worldview is casual and almost osmosis, like it's because you're in the environment. But I like it because it's intentional. It takes you through a course. That's why it's called a curriculum. It takes you through a course of objectives that you should be able to accomplish at the conclusion of it. Here's one that I think is way overlooked now. Because of my doctoral background, doctoral dissertation in reading. I think every parent ought to be reading from Bible stories to their kids, beginning as soon as they'll sit still.
Yep.
The first thing is it helps them academically. It helps their cognitive development. The cognitive is what we know.
Yep.
Is what we learn.
Yep.
All of us have taken different books with our kids and read through them, and then you find the kids later on going through it, and they're talking and they're reading the story themselves. It's not the same words, but they tell the story over and over. It is taken root. And Bible stories will do that. And a good Bible storybook, I think, is essential. It takes them from Genesis to the life of Jesus at the very least, maybe even to the disciples and the founding of the church and the missionary journeys.
I don't remember which one it was. You might be able to tell me, but when I was growing up, this was so helpful for me growing up when I was a kid. We had a Bible, and it was like a comic book.
Yes.
But it was pretty thick. Like, it was like most of the Old Testament stories were in there, even if there were only a couple of pages. Like, it wasn't just like...
My kids all had them, and I can't remember the name of them.
Whatever that was, was great.
The sad thing is that we no longer have bookstores. You used to be able to go into the Lifeway and have the tactile experience of looking through them, and now you can't do that because Lifeway's gone, and most bookstores are gone.
There's a great resource, Mama Bear Apologetics.
Mama Bear
Apologetics.
Excellent.
It was started by I'll have to what do they say? There's not an affiliation, but I'll say I know the person who started it, or at least I'm good friends with her husband, who's also a brilliant apologist in his own right. But she actually kind of started this kind of Christian apologetics book series for kids that just blew up and it's taken off and it's doing really, really well. So mamabearapologetics.com. I haven't read them all myself or anything like that, but knowing the people behind it, I would put a great deal of just sort of automatic trust.
They're considered, again, to be like the gold standard of what they do. They're very, very, very positive.
They're
very,
awesome.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me, we're running out of time, but brings me to this conclusion where you want to expose your kids to literature.
Yeah.
You want to expose your kids. And by the way, I don't believe that necessarily all literature is... it doesn't have to be overtly Christian to be good literature, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Again, I'm going to show my age. When I was growing up, there was a book series called not the Bobbsey Twins. That was a generation before me. The Happy
Iliad? No.
Thanks. No, it's called the Happy Hollisters. There's 30 books.
Okay.
And the Hardy Boys. The Hardy Boys were really big.
I read some Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew growing
They're
up.
mysteries. Encyclopedia Brown was another. They had a bunch of series.
I loved Encyclopedia Brown.
See, so kids read that, and they're morally neutral.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah, there's fun.
But what it does, it teaches your kids to read and to.
They're not even morally. They're probably morally positive. There's probably
because I actually don't believe very much in moral neutrality. I don't necessarily believe in that.
Boxcar Children, I felt like they were really respectful to people, right?
They were,
been a long
because
time, but
they
I feel
reflected the values of those age, and
Yes.
and I think our kids would look at them and say, "Oh, they're so old fashioned."
Yeah.
Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah.
Laura Ingalls
Laura
Wilder,
Ingalls
and she had a
Wilder.
series of 8 books. Those were very important to me in my formative years, because I was the farm boy, and there was a book, A Little Farmer Boy, and
Did you watch the show? Did you guys watch the show?
I did watch the show every week growing up until it got just silly. But and I understand, by the way, they're supposed to be putting out some new episodes. They're going to redo it. I just read that. I think
of Little House on the Prairie.
I think Netflix or Amazon. One of the
they're getting someone's doing they're like a reboot.
That's what I heard.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
How interesting is that?
Largely because Laura Ingalls Wilder was canceled during COVID or right before because of her depiction of Indians in some of her books.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I mean,
she was totally canceled.
Some of that might be legit. I'm just saying,
but the reality is it was the cultural norm.
It would be interesting, sure, but I mean, there's a lot of cultural norms that weren't great at the time.
But we shouldn't be shocked.
Yes, we shouldn't be shocked by if they were using different terms or whatever. But I mean, if Netflix, I mean, probably not HBO, but if Netflix or Hulu or Prime or whoever was we're gonna redo Little House on the Prairie, it would be so interesting to compare. Are they going to try to keep that kind of cultural milieu about it, or is it going to try to be much more modern.
Yeah,
could you do a modern version of that?
I don't think you could do a modern version, but I do think
it's interesting.
I do think it will be sanitized for our protection. You know,
Probably.
I really do.
We should watch that together.
if Angel Studios took it, I think they would probably do a better job of it. But so let me just, as a way of review, Bible storybooks are great. By the way, Kevin DeYoung, who lives in Matthews, Charlotte area, has one called The Biggest Story. It's a really, really good one. Sally Lloyd Jones has a good one. So go, look for those. I have looked for the one that my mom used for years. I'm going to find it someday on eBay. And it's just because I have so many great memories of sitting with my mom, and she'd peel an apple and let us feed it to us bite by bite. Or she used to have I think we've talked about this before. She had a bar of licorice. She would take strips off and we would eat it. Some of my best memories are sitting underneath my mom's arm with her going through those Bible stories over and over again.
That's the point that we should end with is we've talked about a lot of different tools, but in the end, I think the most important thing, regardless of the tool, is the quality focused time that you're spending with the kid using that tool.
Absolutely.
That is the secret. That is the key. Like, I've been working on this a lot lately, personally. Like, I want to make sure that I am being not just around my kids, but present with them when I'm there. And that's a challenge for me when everything's stressful and all that. And so, like, be present and doing this with them, regardless of what version of the kids' Bible it is, or any of these other things, Mama Bear Apologetics, whatever. You doing it with them and them having memories that if they are ever on a podcast, God forbid, one day, that they will also be able to say that I remember and I treasure the memories with my mom and dad. Yeah. Learning these things, even if sometimes it was a little bit cringy or awkward or weird or whatever, like we're doing our best.
But that's part of the fun of growing up, is being able to sit around the table and talk about all the weird, funny, unique things about your family, and you laugh and you relive, and the older you get, you may even have a tear or two trickle down your cheek because those were the days. And so, parents, it's a tough world out there. But you're up to the task. God's word has never changed.
You can do it.
You can do it. And what we just ended with, Josh's point, was so important. The power of presence in parenting can never be underestimated. Yeah. We appreciate the fact you listen to us here at Life Talks. We hope you'll share us on your social media pages. Drop us a line anytime you want at lifetalks@lifecharlotte.com. Until next time, thanks as always for joining us here at Life Talks.